I so want to give a completely different talk now. But you get what you get. Must remember speaking to the mic. So I'm one of those evil people that designs algorithms for advertising companies. That's my day job. In my spare time, I have a huge thing about misinformation and hacking, specifically the idea of belief hacking. So this is me. Yeah, I am totally that evil person. My background is in AI. But in my defense, I just came from teaching about the ethics of algorithms and the ethics of data to class. So, okay. So, belief persuasion, lies, and AI. So, when everything kicked off last November, I looked at what was happening, and it looked to me like a massive hack. So, it looked like somebody had hacked the attention of an entire nation. And it was like, how did this happen? What are the mechanisms here? What is the ecosystem here? What are the counters to this? What can be done? And you guys I see as being part of those counters. So I looked at what was around me. I started thinking about the correlations I was seeing. There were lots of philosophies on belief, lots of philosophies on thought. And how we interact with our worlds. And to me, we are, as humans, are very similar to robots in that we have an environment we work within, we sense within that environment, eyes, nose, hands, whatever. We can have effects within that environment. We can work with other units within that environment. But you never really escape the machine that is you. So that was my first part. My first thing that I noticed was that the high-speed, the scale work seemed to be very similar to the work on autonomous bots that I'd done a long time ago. And can we start talking about those equivalences between groups of humans, behaviors of groups of humans, and groups of bots and behaviors of groups of bots? And find something between that equivalence that we can use. So sensors, things you can see, effectors, things you can change. So there's a philosophical bit. That's where I kind of started from. I also noticed that a lot of what we think of in terms of the beliefs on the network are very similar to the way that old school AI worked. So let's start with the humans. Lots of different definitions of belief, lots of different ways of people believing, but really we were seeing back in November two huge different schools. So we were seeing people who looked for and accepted facts, no grace. It was like black or white. Very much a Republican thing, very much so doxa, this idea of facts, definites. And doxa is the root word for things like orthodoxy, that very religious style of belief. And countering to that was this idea of the grace, pistis, this idea of you had confidences, probabilities of things happening. And that seemed to be very much more what was happening on the other side, that very much sense that we didn't need facts, we needed beliefs. So that got me started thinking about, this isn't about, so we were talking about fake news, it isn't about fake news, this isn't really about misinformation, this is about large changes in belief sets. So you have very strongly held beliefs to weak beliefs, but and this third type of belief, and this one that I came across a lot. So, way back in the day, I designed AI systems. One of the things we talked about a lot was things like expert systems, and one of the things we talked about a lot within that was this idea of normative beliefs, that you didn't just hold your own beliefs. You sometimes held the beliefs that other people expected around you to hold. So it wasn't just that you showed those things that other people expected you, that you started to believe them. And that effect was starting to show as well. This was like the human side of things, looking at the machine side of things. So this is some of the things that, this idea that we're letting loose algorithms, and we're letting loose algorithms on human data. And then we're getting awfully surprised that those algorithms turn out to be, as it says, an arsehole. So the first one was a Chinese program. What happened was a set of facial images of criminals or people who've been prosecuted, fed through a machine, had a really high hit rate for criminal versus non-criminal. Didn't even think, the researchers didn't even think the people that make it to prison might just be the people there are biases against. So we're talking about a very large area with very different faces, regional faces. Is it possible that that was actually showing not who was criminal, but what the biases were in the humans who were sending people to prison? Second one, you kind of let a chatbot loose on Twitter, it's not going to be pretty. And this is a failing of the AI systems that we're seeing. And this is design failing in people like myself not thinking about what the base data is, not thinking about the difference in how we train humans and how we train machines. So there is a difference, and that difference is basically one of culture. So when we train children, we just don't throw them at Twitter and wait for them to come back 18 years later. We tend to put a cultural framework on what they're learning. So there tends to be that second layer that we're not putting on machines, which needs to go in. The other thing is, and part of the first thing about the talk was that this is all about balance, both ways. So yeah, it's bad that you're getting racist chatbots. It's bad that you're getting a set of criminal faces, but also that's exposing something human. And we can use that. So when we start seeing people using bots, we start seeing human persuasion, we start seeing humans being manipulated through bot action. We can also think about what those counters could be in the same vein. You've got a racist chatbot. Okay, what made it racist? What could you change in the humans to stop them being racist? What could you change in those belief systems? So that's kind of from the machine side of things. We kind of looked a bit at humans, looked a bit at machines. So I think we kind of got belief fairly bottomed out here. But beliefs are part of networks. So this is my Facebook network. It's got this massive great cluster in the middle. They're all crisis mappers. Beliefs move across networks, generally. If you look at all the tracking recently of misinformation, you can see its origin points. You can see the points it gets amplified through, the groups it gets pushed out through. So again, you've got something that's being used as an offense, but there's also, you could use that structure as a defense. And I just ran a deployment during Hurricane Maria. There's been so many of the damn things, where we had people out hunting for misinformation, pushing back on it, working out if we could damp down. And the word is we can. It's kind of cool. Small scale, but we can work on scaling that. And the thing about networks is that they're not just one big snurf ball of everyone's talking to everybody else. That's kind of a fully connected clique. You have some nodes in the networks that are more important than others. Generally, you think of the node that's connected to most things as important, but that's not true. That's a node centrality. The power is just totally local. You have different nodes. You have nodes that connect these different snurf balls together. You have bridges connecting them. You have nodes that, just from where they're positioned in the networks, are closest to several snurf balls at once. So they have a power of connection. And then you have the kings of the networks. So PageRank. The way that PageRank works is on eigenvector centrality, which you can identify which people in these networks you can target. So there are pieces of mass we can start to use to counter this. And the reason this gets important is because of this. Basically, the internet. The internet is now our second home. I'm about to go on detox and it's going to hurt like hell. Damn you, Deep Camp. They're taking my tech away for 2 days. It's not going to be nice. The internet, everything you see on the internet is a belief. Everything there, you have to believe what somebody else has said. There is very little connection to reality. The only connections to reality of the internet are ones that you have to believe exist. And this is an incredibly fragile system, incredibly easy to attack. Even before we talk about like the technical underpinnings, but the belief across this, those networks, those flows, those sets are very easy to change. Unless, of course, you're trying to run a political campaign, in which case it becomes bloody awful. But we'll talk about that one later. Sorry, in joke. New Jersey, that's all I need to say. So that's kind of the structure we've got. We've got human beliefs, we've got machine beliefs, we've got networks, and we've got an internet made out of all of this. So let's look at sort of where the threats are. So Cambridge Analytica. So this was a very nice quote from an article about them. So this idea of Facebook likes, about convincing, about this idea of contagion. So this is very much the network as a bot. So you've got these sensors, the likes. You've got these effectors, the types of adverts, the types of memes you're showing people. You've got this idea of those network effects. Contagion is just where a belief spreads across a whole network. And then you've got this adaptation on top of that very AI-like. It keeps learning, it keeps adapting around you. And this kind of is both quite interesting and scary at the same time. But it's also very much standard advertising. It's why I'm in an advertising exchange company, because this is not going away. And I imagine anybody working political campaigns has been thinking about doing this and using this. Without, of course, the bit where they kind of do a load of surveys and learn about you without you telling you anything, and it's totally unethical, but it is still both ways. Things being used against us, things we can use. This is not just we're being attacked and overrun. This is we can push back on this. So, okay, so one problem, beliefs can be hacked. Picking that apart, how individual humans can be attacked, how their beliefs can be damaged. So one thing is we never quite remember things right. And we're biased because, we don't know we're biased. You can use that. I used to use the fact people were biased against young women to break into things. Yeah, that was me. This idea that if you're told something that you want to believe, you're more likely to believe it. Confirmation biases. This immune system effects of... I used to run an innovation group, and most of the art of running an innovation group wasn't coming up with really seriously cool tech. It was working out how to get the ideas behind that tech very gently pushed into a system, into the company, so people didn't just push back on them immediately. So we're working on those immune system effects. How do you get underneath? How do you slowly? One technique is to talk about something else and then just throw in an idea. Talk, la-di-la-di-la-di-la concept. As my ex used to say, a Sesame Street effect. This idea of things like backfires. So if you keep repeating the same thing, even if you say no in front of it, and we do this a lot, thanks, people remember the thing, not the no's. Traces. Traces are really fascinating. If you're given a piece of information, even if you know it's false, you take it in as true immediately, and then you negate it. And that's enough time to fire off a whole bunch of other paths and neurons in your brain. So even if you've taken out the original piece of data you've got, the other stuff sticks. Gilbert did some really good work on that. And then there's this idea of emotions making these things stronger. So damage, that's kind of internal damages, some of the external stuff we've been looking at and talking about, so manipulation biases. Heteronomy is not having agency or control. We've been talking a lot about that implicitly, and we should talk about that more explicitly. These are categories by someone called Lazar. They're worth looking up. And then the sort of bad things you can do to computer beliefs. So you can kind of feed in stuff that's biased to start with. So some of your classifications is human biased. And then things you can start doing to it. So that was the input level. At the modeling level, you can do things like, hey, number of clicks equals the amount of interest I've got. Totally lazy interpretation of the world that doesn't match reality. Going stale. You train a system once and then you expect it to be there forever. It's like that happens way too much. Chucking in dirt. And then this willful abuse. So this idea of if you're training algorithms, you're using algorithms, you feed them things like propaganda and watch them go crazy. And again, this is both something that can be used against us and we can start to use. I see no reason why we shouldn't push back on these assholes. See, I told you I'd swear. Sorry. Okay. Stuff we can do. So human-machine beliefs, we can model them both in similar ways. So we talked about pistis and doxa. This is like, if the grass is wet, it's either the sprinkler or the rain or both. The things around the outside, their probability. So this is a belief network, very, very simple belief network. So this is a model of pistis, but you wipe out those probabilities, you push back to doxa. Both are used in AI systems of different forms. We can talk about different types of storage and algorithm later. But another thing we've seen is a whole bunch of people who've already got techniques for pushing back on network damage. Yeah, okay, I'm good. So hackers. Hackers are already dealing with systems which have contagions going across those systems that they need to contain. So let's go talk to them. In fact, I have. Defcon. Good people. And this idea that even the networks. And we're watching attacks coming in across networks towards us, but that goes both ways. We've already done a tiny scale experiment on that. There are some lovely work going on in Eastern Europe on guys called elves, pushing back on the troll farms, pushing back on misinformation. And we've kind of done a similar thing ourselves. And just here's the stuff that really might be able to help. So left some of the stuff we're worried about, right some of the stuff we need to start thinking about. There's a troll farm out there? Okay, let's talk about elves. Let's start organizing them. Got AI and bots? We can build those. 4chan? We got crowds. Memes, counter memes. We got elections. We ought to expect this crap to happen to us. So let's get set up before it does. Misinformation, there's a whole bunch of work in journalism on that. I'm going to put up a slide in about half a second. And then just the idea of, there are these more ethereal things like, there's this division happening. Let's start connecting again. There are distractions. Turn up with vision. Let's just do it a little bit more solidly. Sorry, I get cross. Other people working on this, people we have as allies. The hackers are talking about this very definitely, working. And if you look at Defcon and B-Sides this year, there have been some very good speeches on Russian misinformation encounters. Journalists, huge pile of stuff going on under Misinfocon. I'm working as part of, I'm just in the credibility standards working group on the pushbacks. Disinformation experts, my nice name for people like CIA, but they're interested too. Certainly not sitting on the bumps. Advertising exchanges. The little advertising exchange I worked for was the first one to ditch Breitbart. And we look at things like bots. We worry about these things. We push back. Crowds, so like the crowdsourcers, the crisis guys, and communities, which includes you guys. All people that should be working together. All people should be talking to each other. Stuff journalists are doing. So just a pile. Some of it's teaching. That only goes so far. Basically, you're not going to get your grandmother to be cynical about every single piece of news that comes past. So some of this is break down the silos, build standards so you know what does and doesn't go out, track what's coming through, push back on it, have interesting ideas like let's have meme wars. Just don't let ourselves be overrun. The hordes are here. Let's hit them back. And just this idea. So this is the data science chain. So if you just look at the words at the tops, these are different types of analysis. And we're kind of down in the what happened and why. We need to move up. We need to push through to what do we think is going to happen? What do we think we can make happen? How do we adapt to this? So there are a whole bunch of theory we can use here. And this guy, it's not going to be just bots or just humans. I think we're going to need both. This is pilot autonomy, control of tasks. It's a very old framework I used to work on for how you get teams of humans and machines working well together. I think that's due a bit of a revival. So I'm done. Don't think I'm in too much trouble for time.